Okay, good afternoon. This is our second briefing, as we promised last time. We're going to brief you on some developments, and we'll take also questions you have, some queries to be further elaborated. I'm not alone this time. I have the general who might address your questions that are not my bag. Issues that are going on the field and some technical matters with regard to the military operations. I just want to begin with some of the pointers that we just abundantly made clear last time, which has to do with as to who initiated the attack. The first claim, which was done by the TPLF leadership, was that they told to the public and to the world that they were attacked by the Ethiopian Defense Force. We categorically repudiated on the very onset. Now they have come to the open and admitted and brazenly bragging about how they attacked the defense forces as what they call the preemptive strike. And so now it is clear as to who initiated the attack, which we deemed it already the Treasonous Act, and which justifies the law enforcement operation going on by the government. The other point, which came out later, is the massacre in Maikadra, which is again crime against humanity. Now it's been picked up by the international community, and it had become clear that civilians who were non-Tigrayans were actually attacked in their hundreds. That was a very egregious act, very inhumane and very much heinous act. That now they kept quiet until the National Defense Force arrived to the area and discovered the bodies, the injured, and the very much traumatized civilians in the areas which they were controlling. Now it's very much clear again as to who would commit that kind of crime. What happened when the defense forces arrived the area will be actually elaborated by General. He would tell you what his friends have discovered in the area when the TPLF special forces and the militia left the area, attacking civilians, massacring without sparing even children and women. Now they are saying it has to be investigated. It could be investigated. Investigation could be relevant as to identify who actually gave that order and which members of the special force and which members of the militia who actually committed the act. Otherwise, the order was given, the intention was given by the entire leadership, and the entire leadership, especially the upper echelon, is the one to blame, because they've been very much adamant in creating hysteria and uses of alienation of the Tigrayan people, as if the defense forces have been there to subdue and to harass Tigrayan people, as if it had never been collecting their resources, as if it had never been contributing its own salary to build dams, as if it had never been toiling with the peasants, living their own life with both difficult times and at times of jubilation. The army had been there for 2 decades. And now, because they renegade themselves to turn against their own defense force, which they've been training, which they've been leading, so they must have ordered their special forces. The reason is they don't care about the people they think they represent, because there have been hundreds of thousands and millions of Tigrayans outside Tigray being scattered in different parts of Ethiopia. And the motive is, once they attacked non-Tigrayans there, they expect other Ethiopians could retaliate by attacking Tigrayan people who are living everywhere. And then that would further escalate the tension, that would further escalate the division, and thereby they cut all the fabrics which would connect Ethiopians together, and that would further alienate the Tigrayan people. And then in a bid for the secession, you know, you must have been aware by now that they are calling their special forces and militias as Tigrayan Defense Force. So that is paving the way to cut all the fabrics which have put us together, to melt all the glue which actually put Ethiopians together, and then to further alienate Tigrayan people so that they can turn their back on Ethiopianism and move away. So that is the premeditated and very much planned atrocity, which was to trigger revenge by other Ethiopians against Tigrayans. That's why the government is now clear to give an order to all the administrative areas whereby the communities could usher and also sue the Tigrayan Ethiopians not to be scared, not to be afraid of, or if any malfeasance discovered by any Ethiopians, whether for economic reason, whether for political reason, whether for reasons which could not be tenable in any way, so the government would take serious action. And now that's why the mayor of Addis Ababa went out to the public and gathered Tigrayan people and discussed with others. So that direction is to actually douse the very much incitement where the TPLF leadership try to instigate in Ethiopia. So we're not going to allow them. Ethiopians, we're not going to allow them. We stand together, and even Tigrayan people would breathe the air of freedom like other Ethiopians are now trying to have. That's what the Ethiopian government is doing, law enforcement and rooting out bad elements from our political dispensation. There is one thing. The other aspect, we actually made it clear again, they are trying to escalate the issue and then attack the neighboring people, neighboring regions, whereby the conflict would be spiraled to the national level. That's why they attacked the Amhara people in Gondar, in Bahada. And that's why the government was saying, unless the arsenals destroyed or wrested away from these ringleaders, they wouldn't spare, they wouldn't hesitate to strike anybody around, so that they can create havoc and hysteria in Ethiopia, and that would result in civil war. So that's why the government has to destroy their armaments which have been discovered, and now we keep on destroying as we go along. These were the very points which we raised, and then now they have become public records, and every one of you are aware of those issues. The other aspects that we also wish to make it clear is they are trying to scare the Tigrayan people so that they can flee away from home and go to other areas, because then they can create humanitarian crisis, which might also trigger the international attention, and then the international community might be compelled to rush in for mediation to avert the inevitable human crisis. So these are the points we wish to share with you, and then you might have also been somehow sensed that these are the things going on. In other areas, the general might also give you some areas which might seek your attention. Then I will give you the floor for your questions and inquiries. Let me shoot your questions down as per their chronological order. With regards to the Coletta's question in connection to the TPM's mission to Uganda, I've seen the news being bandied about, but I would like to tell you, and it's very much spurious and disingenuous. There had never been an attempt by Uganda to mediate. We've never heard a question from Uganda, and we've never also asked Uganda or any other country to mediate, because our position was very much clear from the onset. Yes, the mission is sent to Uganda, but not to Uganda, but to the entire region, and the mission that was delegation led by Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister covers around 6 countries, particularly the IGAD member countries. So it's not solely destined to Uganda. Now they met with His Excellency Museveni, and now in the afternoon they will meet with Kenyatta, and then it goes on. So it has nothing to do with mediation. Rather, the delegation actually was interested to deliver a message of the Prime Minister, which augments and buttresses and make it further clear that we don't need any mediation until we bring the ringleaders to court, because any mediation would incentivize impunity and unruliness. So any partner who wishes the holding together of Ethiopia, and then the government has to be supported to make sure that the law of the land is upheld. To equate the government with any subnational entity who threatens the very existence of the country would actually elevate such impunity, and if impunity reigns in Ethiopia, then Ethiopia wouldn't exist. So any country should put itself, any partner should put itself in our shoe. Would any country in the world allow an entity in a district or in a county who openly claims to have a rocket or missile and vow to attack its headquarters and dismantle the country and attack openly its defense forces? Which country in the world would be asked to sit down and negotiate with such entity of a subnational unruly group? So if any country doesn't wish to do it, if it happens on its soil, then it would be tantamount to relegating the government to every unruly entity which might have popped up in one or the other areas. Now, if this government would sit down and actually negotiate with ringleaders in Tigray, then it has to sit down in every other parts of the country whenever somebody has access to a rocket and missile and threatens the very headquarters of the country. So it simply incentivize ungovernability in any nation. So that's why it's not because we are averse negotiation, it's not because we are averse roundtable, civil, cordial discussion, but until the rule of law is upheld, until the very gang is brought to justice, and then there is no way that we can ensure civil order in any country, and particularly so in Ethiopia. That's why we are saying give us time, because it's not going to take entirety. It wouldn't last to eternity. It's very much short, would be a short-lived operation, whereby the people of Tigray would understand that this culprit had been doing nothing good to Tigray. They've been living their posh life. None of their children are in Ethiopia. Most of them are in Europe and America. They are being paid in one of the Ivy League universities. So their children would not fight this fight. And then you know the conscripts, under 17. So it is the poor who is paying the price. It is the peasant who is paying the price. Now, these people do not care because they are in their 80s, late 70s, and early 90s. So they still wish to die, dragging down some of their compatriots. They have enough to eat. Why don't you let their younger brothers and sisters to just live their own life? So that's the question the government is asking. Very short time, so that people would understand and push them away. And then people of Tigray can lead their civil life, and then the younger generation would figure out how to fend itself when these lingers are actually taken away from their neck. So it's the government's only weeding out bad elements. Otherwise, negotiation would be inevitable. Discussion would be inevitable. But if we sit with everybody who acquires rocket and missile, then who would govern Ethiopia? who would actually call the shots when it comes to popular and leading the daily life of Ethiopians, because everybody becomes a ruler on his own. So everybody becomes a law unto himself. And then no country would survive in such a manner. So we appreciate concerns, both from near and afar. We appreciate concerns that they are true concerns. But again, we want to make it very clear the real context of what's going on. Some friends, they are afraid. These ringleaders are very much experienced. They've been fighting for so long, so the government wouldn't subdue them. Hence, you would end up in quagmire. So can you just sit and talk? How can you sit and talk with such an antisocial element, such an unruly group, which tries to control every bit of your heartbeat? So it's very much untenable now to sit down. But when this operation going on being successful as it is now, so we hope it will be very much sooner that things would be solved in a discussion. We cannot finish everything by just undergoing operation. You cannot finish everything by just putting everybody to prison. But if you take away the gang, the leaders, others would reason out and then figure out in a very cordial manner. That's what we are asking our friends to understand. And we don't deem any attempt to suggest negotiation as meddling. It's, by and large, it's just genuine concern for Ethiopia. But again, because we are Ethiopians, so we know in and out, and we say we must be listened to, because it's us who understand what's best for us. And then when we seek for assistance, then we appreciate anybody who lends us a right hand. That's what we are saying, otherwise it's not meddling. Refugees are saying airstrikes. I think General would augment my argument, and you might have witnessed by now. If the army meant to bomb civilian areas, and those artillerists that you just said, we thought we wipe out, and now they are having some, we could have done it. And let me give you one news, a fact that was actually going on. You know, they claimed the military strike Tekeze Dam. And you know what happened was the pilot flew to strike a target, and the moment he just checks the target, he saw that people were near to the target, and he decided, against the order, he decided not to strike, and then decided to fly back to his base. But again, you know, he cannot land with the bomb that he carries. So he has to throw it on the river, Tekeze, far away from the dam. But now these guys picked up the story, they strike the substation, and then they blame on the government that the government cut off the light, while the dam is actually intact. So if our military was, you cannot even call it reckless. If someone has a missile in a certain area, then you have to strike it, even though you might face some casualties. But the government didn't do that. Whenever they saw there are people there, whenever they saw some villages are encroaching to the target, then we better risk. That's what we did, and that's why they threw some of the rockets to Bahadar and Gonda. But now I think they might have run out. And then you saw the other allegation today. They say a jet was flying lower enough to crack windows. And then if they say they would hit a jet while it lands or it takes off, how come they failed to strike it when it was flying low enough to be seen and to crack windows? So they are good at lying, and they are good at to stick to their lies. Sometimes they even fail to stick to their lies, and they have to change and create another story. So unless you connect the dots, you will end up being hoodwinked by a series of lies and fabrications. Like you said, they said they were attacked. Now they said, no, we attacked for preemptive reasons. And then the other time they said the dam was attacked when everybody saw the dam was intact, and then said, no, it was not the dam, but it was substation. And on the other time, they said they will strike everybody, and then when they fail, now the government is actually now striking the civilians. Our fear was they can even strike their own civilians here, and then they blame on the government because they can create more anger by the public. So these are the points which you mentioned. Another, yes, there was a strike, and the strike was not on Mekelle, it was on Sabarbas. But because General May augmented, these fighter jets do use very high energy, and when they fly, they have a huge sound that can crack windows, and when it goes a little bit down, then it might have serious impact, even though it may not strike the actual civilian area. So it flew, attacking military targets which might be used by the TPLF leadership and its special forces. But no civilian target was actually hit. It's been spared, as was the case in all the times. Casualties, Simon said, like General said, there are some members of the defense forces whereabouts are not yet known. And because in Mekelle areas, it was easiest, as I told you last time, it was easiest to subdue because most of them were staffers, health, and other administrative professionals, most of them. So combatant soldiers were very few, and it was easiest to subdue them. And in those areas which have been already discovered, we found bodies. In other areas, we have not yet known whereabouts, so we have to keep on finding out either casualties or defense forces who are still in captivity of these forces. So it's not good to play around numbers. It's good to stick to the actions, and the action is treasonous enough. It doesn't matter whether they killed 10 or 30 or 100 soldiers. The very strike itself is a crime enough, and then number of casualties would simply would be icing the cake. It doesn't change the real atrocities, the real heinous action. So it would simply add figures. It doesn't matter whether 10 soldiers were killed. It doesn't change the atrocity whether it grew to 100. So we have to keep on finding out whereabouts of all soldiers, and then when they realize how many we lost, how many we still have to find, then the numbers would be public. On civilians, you know, the Maikadra casualty is already 500. In other areas, about 500 were massacred in Maikadra. That was intentional act. In other areas, you know, whenever there is a conflict going on, then you cannot rule out casualties, even intentional shooting by some or cross-firing by the other. So we have to keep on also now, because some cities are now freer. Caretaker administration is now being established. When caretaker administration actually sets foot and then begin operational, now we have to keep on discussing with the locals so that they can give us their accounts as to whereabouts of their fellow neighborhood friends and sisters. Then we'll come up with the real numbers. Otherwise, it will be wild because, as you said, some of Ethiopians flee to the Sudan border, and then we have to know who is who. Now it's being told the number, like 10,000, 15, 20, now about 20,000. So we have to know who is who. How many of them are soldiers? How many of them are policemen? How many of them are just civilians in the neighborhood? And then we'll come up with other numbers whereby those who didn't cross, those who have not found out, but now they could be missing, then those missing people must be searched. Then when you finish hoping to search, then the numbers will come up and then be public. The other point, pressure from humanitarian agencies to create a corridor, yes, is a real concern, and government is now working day and night to just come up with solutions because, as just said, there are a number of people who have been supported. There are also refugees of Eritrean origin. There are people who get earning from safety nets. Now, there are two scenarios. On one hand, we have areas which are free now. So on free towns and cities and districts, the government can handle the issue. Now food is going and being stored there. In other areas, still deep into the conflict areas, which have yet to be free. In those areas, yes, the humanitarian agencies may need to work in collaboration with the government. And now we have set up committees from different pertinent institutions, and now they are traveling to Tigray to find out the factors on the ground, and then they will come up with solutions. Which institutions might take care of the actual humanitarian actions, and then which corridors might be safer to transport humanitarian assistance in those areas. So I think we'll come up with a couple of days with a solution. And then we've already been working with OCHA and UNHCR and others, and ICRC, and government institutions with Minister of Peace, our minister itself from Defense and others. Now we've sent a delegation, and that team would look out for factors on the ground, and then we'll come up with a plan as to how to actually take care of the humanitarian issues before it becomes crisis. Now it's a concern. It's not yet a crisis, but we can manage it, we hope, before it becomes a crisis. So these are the pointers. I just would... okay, Skandar, you had one question. The PM said that Ethiopia is capable of funding itself, whether it is related to Eritrean... no, you see, TPLF leadership was accusing government of colluding with a foreign entity to subdue them. And I just want to, I just would rather you refresh your memory as to why the Northern Command was there for the last 20 years. The Northern Command itself was alone enough to fend off the entire Ethiopian sovereignty from the northern part, and then if it was enough to fend off Eritrean aggression when we were at odds, now it is capable of subduing its own very amateur special force and militia. So we don't need to invite anybody to just take care of our business, because it becomes unbecoming, and then it wouldn't add much. While you are capable of doing it, and you don't need other entities. But we made it clear that they were producing uniforms of Eritrean government. Why? They are doing now two things. One, we already had Eritrean opposition forces operating in Ethiopia when we were at odds. You know, they were feeding our opposition forces, and then we were doing the same. It's like a tit for tat. Now it's over. When the rapprochement came, then we didn't see the point. We brought ours, but theirs did not wish to go, so we let them leave. But there is no support, there is no military operation. They were just as refugees. Now these TPLF people are trying to convince these opposition parties to put on Eritrean soldiers' clothes, and then they say they were fighting for, they were sent by the Eritrean government, while we know they are opposition parties, while we know they have been here for decades. Now, it's kind of a deception to just propagate that the Eritrean government was meddling in Ethiopia. The other aspect, they are also trying to convince refugees who have been here, who have been in Tigray for quite so long. Now they are being convinced to say that they were sent by the Eritrean government to fight alongside Ethiopian government, and then the spear campaign would seem to hold water, so that they can buttress their make and believe stories. So that is the background. Otherwise, it has nothing to do with the current spurious, fanciful stories that are being bandied about. Thank you.